Okay. Welcome to our weekly webinar of the series Conversations with Mexicans in New England. I'm Alberto Fierro, the Consul General of Mexico. These series of conversations are organized with the help of our wide network of Mexican scientists, artists, entrepreneurs, researchers, and educators living in New England that help us bring awareness to the important contributions our community is making here in New England and abroad. These conversations are posted in the consulate social media accounts every Tuesday afternoon, so please be sure to follow us. This week, we are really happy to welcome our first guest who's not Mexican, but has worked very closely with several projects related with our country, Brittany McDonough, who is Senior Director of Global Partnerships at MassChallenge. We also have Oliver Sánchez, who is a Mexican entrepreneur. Thank you, Brittany and Oliver, for being with us today. Brittany is one of the best known, works for one of the best known largest startup friendly accelerator. At MassChallenge, Brittany oversees strategic partnerships with international governments and institutions to support MassChallenge in achieving its mission to catalyze a global startup renaissance, focusing on international expansion. And as I mentioned, she oversees the programs with Mexico. Oliver Sánchez, among other ventures, he's a managing partner at Axel Hub and Axel Hub Venture Partners, which supports technology entrepreneurs from Latin America to scale their company in the US. He is currently CEO and founder of ExtraSense Technologies, a software company that uses artificial intelligence to enhance a human ability to identify pests. Oliver was selected as one of the top 50 most daring entrepreneurs in the US by Entrepreneur Magazine in 2017. I'm sorry to make shorter your bios. It is, I know you have done a lot more, but we thought that it's more important to hear what you have to say about your experience. As we all know, we're going through a very hard moment worldwide. The pandemic has caused not only a health crisis, but an economic crisis that has impacted millions of lives. On the positive side, we have seen a lot of people taking action to fill out the gaps that need immediate attention, not only in the healthcare industry, but in every other one. Not only have we seen new products and solutions, but we have also seen industries that are innovating while adapting to the new normal. It is said that a difficult economic environment requires people to innovate more rather than stepping back and slowing down. Today, cities like Boston, San Francisco, and New York have built large innovation ecosystems where emerging companies thrive and could someday become the next Amazon, Uber, or Netflix. One of the most important elements inside these ecosystems are the accelerators, just as MassChallenge and Axel. So let's begin our conversation. Oliver, you have been involved with the innovation ecosystem in Boston for a long time, and you even founded your own accelerator to support startups founded by immigrant entrepreneurs. What can you tell us about your beginnings and how you've seen Boston evolve for these entrepreneurs? How do you differentiate an accelerator from an incubator?
Thank you, Consul and Paulina and Brittany. Thanks for having me here. So yeah, it's I've been involved since I've been in the Boston area for almost 20 years and involved with entrepreneur startup ecosystem for the last 8 or 9. And one of the reasons I got involved in building our own program was because I saw the challenges that entrepreneurs from different countries would have when trying to access the Boston ecosystem, in general, the US ecosystem in general. And there's awesome programs that have entrepreneurs from all over the country. MassChallenge is one of them, and all over the world, really. But there's some cultural challenges, some communicative challenges that entrepreneurs face coming from a different country. And to answer your second question, the difference between accelerator and incubators, a lot of people sometimes uses the words interchangeably, but there are some significant differences for somebody who is new to this ecosystem. One, I think the two main differences in my mind are the structure. So an accelerator is usually based on a specific time. It could be a couple of weeks, it could be a couple of months. At the end of those months, there's a demo day where the companies participating in these accelerators present in front of investors or industry experts. And usually it's based on mentoring and helping a company accelerate or scale growth, right? So this is why the accelerator comes from. And incubators are usually dealing with companies at the earliest stage of development, so less developed companies. There's usually not a set program date. There's no like set weeks or months. Usually the incubators hosting companies in their office space. There's usually a corporate partner involved or a venture capital fund involved. And what they're really trying to get to is get ideas or research projects from an early stage to the stage where they can really accelerate the growth. So I think in summary, you're looking at two different stages in development of companies, and also the structure of an accelerator and incubator are different.
Thank you, Oliver. Brittany was not able to get her telephone to show her image, so here I show the one she posted. Brittany, could you briefly describe the kind of work that MassChallenge does and what it stands out from other accelerators? And could you tell us how the MassChallenge program in Mexico worked and why was Mexico chosen to be part of your programs?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I like the console said, I'm unfortunately having quite a number of technology challenges, so I apologize for not being on actual video. The description that Oliver gave of an accelerator versus an incubator is literally perfect. So MassChallenge is called an accelerator because we want to support companies over a finite point of time when they're in need of particular resources, specifically business development and growth opportunity type resources with mentorship, experts from the community, et cetera, versus just housing companies for 1-2 years plus or beyond. So the program in Boston is our headquarters. That's the first program we started way back in 2009, actually. So we are 10 years old. And we're a nonprofit, which is really important to us. We want to support companies without taking anything from the ecosystem. So we want to really be at the center of the overall ecosystem and add value and really be the convener of the different stakeholders, from corporates to governments to investors, with startups really at the center. So back in 2012, we actually started working with the government around Guadalajara, and we started what's called a Bridge to MassChallenge program. So we first worked with companies 20 or so at a time in a cohort, and we would both go to Zapopan and run in-person boot camps, and then bring companies to Boston so they were able to have an experience where they're entering a new market. We would work with attorneys and accountants and various professional service providers to allow them to kind of get a feel for what it would be like to actually have to open a company here, if it was a good fit or not. And then after doing that program for about 2 years, we saw that there's just a tremendous amount of talent across Mexico. And really, Mexico City was a huge opportunity for MassChallenge to access the broader Latin American market. So then in 2015, we announced the full program, and it was our first program in that entire region. So we were super, super excited to be in Mexico City. And now we are on our 4th year of a cohort. So we've graduated a large number of companies, so going into over 200 startups that are from across the entire Latin American region. And many of those are headquartered in Mexico and are working to both build teams that are cross-functional to support technology and broader business development goals for the startup. So the same person has actually run that program the entire time. And it's been amazing to see what she's been able to accomplish. And she's brought really important groups to the table, from Amex to Facebook to Mitsubishi, to support the growth of those startups. So that's our kind of a snippet of our programming and our history in Mexico. And I'm happy to answer any questions about whether it's the Mexico program, our broader international engagements, and then the specifics of the program.
And how is it funded, Brittany?
Sure. So primarily the programs are supported by the ecosystem through government funding, corporate funding, and philanthropic donations. So as a nonprofit, we're not able to actually make money necessarily from the program, which is really important to us. So we don't take equity from the startups. We don't charge the startups for the program. We're very much reflective of the communities we're in. And in Mexico, the first partners were from the government.
Thank you so much for the explanation. Oliver, last year you headed a program where more than 7 Mexican entrepreneurs came to Boston and worked with you. What can you tell us about it? How do you feel a year, almost a year and 1 month later, and what has happened with those startups that you know of?
Great. Yeah, so, that program, as you mentioned, the program last year was a culmination for us of multiple efforts. Actually, Paulina knows us for several years now, and multiple efforts to create a path, a bridge, if you will, a bridge between the Latin America, specifically Mexico, and the Boston ecosystem. And, we're finally able to get a pilot off the ground. And last year's pilot, as you mentioned, we got up to 70 applications. And of 70 applications, we narrowed down to 7 companies. And the 70 companies came here for a 12-week program with the focus of really creating a network and transforming it into essentially U.S. corporations. We knew from our experience that many of the investors, if not all the investors that we talked to, would not invest in necessarily foreign legal entities, but they would invest in a U.S. corporation as long as the technology was good. So our goal here with the program was to find technologies that had potential with a U.S. market potential and help them in their soft landing and pitching to an investor and essentially, becoming U.S. companies. Ultimately for us, the goal of that is to prove to ourselves and to really the outside ecosystem that the technology and the talent was there. They just needed some help and resources. Out of the 7 companies that we brought, 4 companies actually ended up opening operations here. 2 were able to raise VC funding, 1 from a U.S. investor, 1 from a Mexican investor. I know all of them keep progressing, but since it's last year, I don't think any of them have done any major steps except, we had startups from prior years that raised, a couple $1 million in funding recently. So I know it takes a little bit of time for these startups to develop, but we were very happy with the success and the track record that we developed. And it's actually that program that led us to create Excel Venture Partners. Out of that program, to our demo day, which I think you guys were invited and kindly attended, we had over 100 people attend that final demo day. All people interested in investing in Latin American startups, and we got approached probably by 20-30 people that night saying, hey, I want to invest in some of these companies. And so this is why we decided to create an angel group that invests in these companies, because we say, you know what, it'll help when the startups come here. We know there's talent, we know there's opportunity. Why don't we invest in these companies as well, and partake in that upside as they develop in the U.S. So anyway, for us it was a milestone moment in the organization, because it put together finally all our efforts that we've tried for the last couple of years in creating this bridge program to help entrepreneurs from Mexico come here.
For me, it was a most wonderful, welcoming experience. It was, I think, 2 days after I arrived that I knew your kids, and my first weeks here were exactly sharing with you and all those companies. That was fantastic. Yeah. Since you both have had the experience of working with Mexican entrepreneurs, could you speak about that experience? What do these entrepreneurs have in common? How can they improve? what has been your best experience working with them? Brittany, do you want to begin?
Yeah, I'm happy to share some reflections from a couple different cohorts that came through. We've seen amazing companies across industries, so from consumer packaged goods to life sciences, and actually a lot of really high-end manufacturing and creating manufacturing jobs that are very much kind of engineer focused. One of the comments that we always made to the companies when they were coming to Boston is to be a little bit more boasty. So it is very common across US entrepreneurship programs and broadly when you're in an ecosystem to see an entrepreneur. Sorry, there was a commotion outside of my building. There's an entrepreneur that is talking all about what their program does, what their startup can do, their technology, etc. What we see from a lot of the Mexican startups that come to Boston is they're very, very humble, and they're not really talking broadly about what they're doing in the future. So our primary commentary was very much brag a little bit more. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually something that is really important for entrepreneurs to be able to get face time with investors, to get face time with government officials and other groups that they're listening to the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur is very confident. So that was one of our primary feedbacks.
Thank you, Brittany. What about you, Oliver?
Yeah. Thanks for. So I have a whole like. Yeah, I was gonna say I have like a whole presentation on this because we've been dealing with this for so long, But if I were to summarize this, there's certainly what Brittany said is one of the items that is pervasive. One of the challenges pervasive, not only Mexico but all LATAM. The lack of self-belief sometimes, if you want to call it, or just reflected in this lack of self-promotion. But if I were to to answer your second question, what could they do more or better? I think there's two words I want to bring into this conversation. One is creativity, and the other is innovation. And as Mexicans, we're always here like, oh, we're so creative, like everyone's so creative. And there's a difference between creativity and innovation. And the main difference is that innovation requires prolonged work to change structures of systems, right? So it's not just about coming with different ideas or different momentary design concepts, but it's actually putting the work to transform industries or companies, if you will. So I think and Mexican entrepreneurs are very creative, but sometimes lack that that expertise or the support network to be innovative. And it's seen in that sometimes they don't execute as well or as detailed as some other entrepreneurs in the US and Western Europe. This is all changing, and I think this is part of becoming a more mature ecosystem. But in order for an entrepreneur, for example, to receive VC funding in the US, they have to convince somebody that they're the best in the world at whatever they're doing. Because in Boston, like New York and Silicon Valley, you're competing against the world. You're not competing against your countrymen. So you have to convince people that you're the best in the world at whatever you're doing. And if it's something is not truly innovative and you can't communicate that message, it's going to be hard for you to succeed.
So I suppose that my grandmother used to have a saying that Mexicans, we are very much con permiso. Please, could I please? We asked, and maybe we need to be a little more aggressive in terms of selling our strengths and not being shy of saying what we are. I agree with you. In moments of crisis like this one, when the most pressing issue facing public and private institutions is the crisis itself, how would you argue for large enterprises and governments to risk investing in new technological solutions?
I mean, oh, there's Brittany. Brittany, you wanna take that one since you're now live?
Yes. So finally it worked. Sorry, I had to literally reboot my computer and do all the Zoom things. Cool. Okay. Good to see people. So I'm sorry, Consul, could you repeat the question?
In this time of crisis, how would you argue for large enterprises and governments to risk investing in new technological solutions?
Yeah, so I actually would pose a bit of a challenge to the question because I wouldn't say it's a risk. I think it actually shows forethought. And right now is the time where there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in the startup community because they're working to solve real problems very quickly. And a lot of large institutions, whether they're corporations or governments, have a really difficult time innovating internally, or they will allocate a significant amount of resource. So on a corporate, you're looking at 6, 7 staff people and then a big budget, when a startup has that solution already. So they're able to actually invest into a startup or even acquire a solution for a fraction of the price of if they were to do it themselves. And then on the government side, there's a lot of research around job creation relative to startups. And there's a professor out of California called Professor Moretti, and it's a thing called the Moretti multiplier effect. And the research shows that for every one job created by a high impact startup, so a technology-based startup, the broader economy adds at least 6 more jobs. So these are from professional service providers like the lawyers that are representing them to even just bars and restaurants that are there to support the innovation community. Because you see the seaport, there's lots of places to go out for kind of food and drink. And the economic growth from startups is really significant. And that's what the government can actually have a huge role in, is maintaining those jobs. And if you look at Massachusetts in 2008, so go back to the recession, what Governor Patrick did was actually identify an industry to strengthen that he knew would both pay off in investment opportunity and in job growth. And that is actually what happened with the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. And we saw a huge influx in both large corporates that moved to the Commonwealth, but also startups in the life sciences and pharma space.
Thank you, Brittany. What do you have to say, Oliver? Mexican venture capitalists are we don't find that many people wanting to risk. What is your experience, Oliver?
So I look at it from at a macro level and a micro level. So at a macro level, you look at where the spending, R&D spending for like Mexico and Latin American country is very low to where on economies, but compared to where our ranking our economy size should be, right? So if we were like one of the top economies in the world, where we're like in the 60th place in R&D spending, there's a huge gap there between what we think as a country is valuable for economy and what is not. And so that's at a macro level, I think there's a challenge there. And then at micro level, I think from the VC perspective, I think Latin America as a whole has a big challenges in lack of VC, although they have seen substantial increases over the last years. I mean, I think last year was, they set a new record in terms of funding. There was like $2 billion in funding in Latin America as a whole. But once you peel back the onion, you realize that the business models that are getting funded are business models that are, I wouldn't call necessarily innovative. They're disruptive for the market in their market, in the Latin American market. But these are models that are seen in the US and Europe. So these are talking about distribution, food delivery, e-commerce platforms. So these are all great innovations for the region, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily innovative products that are going to change the world, right? And so I think there's still I would say a lack of understanding of what true innovation disruption, how it benefits the economy, and ultimately how do you actually extract value out of it in the ecosystem. So we've seen VCs spend, put a lot of money into models that they understand because they know that how they're going to make money and how potentially they're going to exit. You see very few put money into models that are disruptive and they don't understand, right? And you see that a lot more in ecosystems like Boston. So you have, for example, the Engine, which is like MIT funded accelerator and fund, right? Microfund. And they're putting money into technologies that are really hard to develop. And the reason they do that is because they know nobody else will. But if they do, they achieve one of these successes, that's it. That they'll get, they'll get return on, multiples on their return. So, that's a kind of I would say long-term forward thinking that may be lacking or maybe missing in our countries,
Thank you. We have a wonderful experience of BioBot, a small company that began as a startup, and now with the pandemic, they were working with the water, Paulina, measuring
Pathogen,
in
pathogens in wastewater, correct? Yeah.
wastewater. And now suddenly the pandemic allowed them to sell to more than 60 cities and be funded interestingly. So in your experience, have you seen that COVID pandemic has brought a rise in entrepreneurship? And how do you see or envision the near future?
I mean, for me, if you had asked me this question 2 months ago, I would have been, super, I would say, negative about this and say, everybody's holding the cash back, etc. But over the last month and a half, I would say I was seeing an explosion of funding opportunities, new funds being created, new funds being raised. I definitely see the COVID-19 challenge and the pandemic as a catalyst for what I would say like a transformation how the world is going to be in the next 20, 30 years. It really accelerated things that were already underway, like bio, but it's a perfect example, right? We're talking about, research into measuring, they started with measuring drug levels, I think, right, in sewer systems, and quickly transitioned to pathogen levels. And now everybody wants to measure pathogens remotely. It makes perfect sense, right? And now when they're thinking about, we want to do this through IoT device and do it fastly, it accelerated that process, a process that already started and it was in people's minds. But now you're like, you know what? Now we have to go full speed ahead because that's the new normal. So in my mind, it really changed. It had really created opportunities for some companies that are going to basically create the way we live in the next 25 years. And so, yeah, I've seen this as a great opportunity for some companies, not so much for others.
You had mentioned something in that same line, Brittany, but would you want to tell us a little more? Now we can see you, but not you.
Yeah, right. That would be how it worked out. But at first, there was a lot of concern about the funding capacity and the ability for VCs specifically to do due diligence and connect with founders, especially when everything is virtual. And one of the things that we've seen is the true power of a network. And if you're connecting with an investor and you either are a serial entrepreneur who received investment from a group in the past, or you're recommended by either a member of their fund, both on the investment side or on the employee side, that you're getting much more face time right now. So the power of a network is even more important I think in post-COVID investment world. Beyond that, everyone is just kind of getting used to being remote. There's not the same appetite for the really large, 1,000, 2,000 person conferences. People don't feel comfortable. So I don't think that we'll be seeing any of that type of work in the future. I think there'll be smaller events, certainly. But the way that people are connecting and the opportunities for investment, I think that whole process is now, it's been forced to innovate on its own self.
What, like in starting to close our conversation, what would you tell aspiring entrepreneurs that are doubting themselves about taking the next step with and without a pandemic?
I would say, there's never a good moment to start your business. It really isn't. There's always, reasons not to do it. I would say there's always more reasons not to do it than to do it all the time. But, in my experience, I've now lived through the real estate recession, the Great Recession, and the dot-com bust of early 2000s. And, every time after the first dot-com bust, I was right out of college, and I always told myself, next time a recession comes by, I'm really going to take a chance. I'm really going to do something, innovative, because I saw that what happens when the companies that survive these recessions, they become leaders, they dominate markets. Then the real estate recession came by, the Great Recession came by, and then it looked so scary. Institutions like the Bear Stearns and companies that you never thought would fell, and so that was another fear moment. You're like, okay, now nothing's gonna happen. I better be safe and better be conservative in my actions. And again, new companies were created after that, and new leaders in the world created after that. And so I say it from my personal experience with entrepreneurs. If you have an idea, if there's an opportunity, you see an opportunity in the market, there's never a better time than when there's this, you know, this challenging, you know, life altering events, because at the end of that challenging time, at the end of the process, you know, the new leaders, the people that are going to dominate markets are gonna come. And so, you know, if you're gonna obviously take care of your family and take care of bills first, but if you can do it and you take the risk, there's never a better time than today.
Thank you, Oliver. What do you think, Brittany? What
I
would you tell them?
fully agree. Now is the best time to jump into something. People are going to be seeking out solutions, and people that are showing leadership and the ability to drive something forward in a time where things are complex. So there'll be people that are kind of remarking at your confidence, and that's something that is important. But also there's going to be new solutions needed. Everything from grocery delivery to simply stocking shelves at grocery markets. That's one of the startups that we've actually seen do really well in the past few months. That was an alumni that had their startup receive a large investment. The founder left and he started this company specifically to respond to grocery needs in and around the city of Boston. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and just jump right in.
Thank you. Paulina, would you have something to ask?
Yeah,
Additional?
actually, I would want to go back a little bit because when we weren't live, Brittany was mentioning about the different programs that MassChallenge has around the world, not just only in Boston, but you can also have access to these programs in different cities like Mexico. So could you tell us a little bit more about this program in Mexico?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of offices, we have Boston, Rhode Island, Houston, Texas, Austin, Texas, Mexico City, Luzon, Switzerland, and Israel. So there's a lot of full-fledged offices, and those are the early stage accelerators. So companies that have raised under $2 million from private capital. And all of those accelerators are international. So if you're a startup from Mexico, you're welcome to apply to any and all of those programs. And like Oliver, you can actually go through multiple. We've actually seen that as something that a lot of founders like, the opportunity of going through what you would call a home program. So if you're from Boston or you're from Mexico, you go through that program. And then to enter a new market, if you haven't raised a significant round of funding, you're able to go through another MassChallenge program in a different market. Through the Bridge to MassChallenge program, we have an additional 12 or so markets that are part of the network. And we work with government partners to be able to both foster development and support the introduction of international startups into those markets. So everywhere from Taiwan to Australia, Ireland. We just finished a program in Morocco in June. So really a wide network. And that's, I think, the advantage of a group like MassChallenge is, as a nonprofit, we're able to work with so many different entities, but we're also able to actually look and see where is there opportunity for the startups and make the right introductions for them.
And how do you choose the cities where you're gonna establish a new office?
So it's a combination of startup talent, government support, and corporate opportunity. So there have to be kind of these three primary perfect pieces, but then also are we seeing an opportunity broadly for the MassChallenge startups? Do our alumni want to go there? That's also a consideration we often take.
Great, thank you.
Would anyone want to add anything you haven't said for our public to close our conversation?
I would just add, Consul, that, you know, for Mexicans that are here, or Mexicans that are seeing from, you know, in abroad and in our home country, that, you know, there's a lot of resources available to you, both online and in programs like the ones from MassChallenge. Take advantage of the programs. You know, I think there's more support for entrepreneurs now than ever was. When I graduated college, I think there was like one accelerator. So, you know, take advantage of the programs. You know, you don't have to know everything to launch a company. You do need to be a good learner, and you need to be intellectually curious. But you know, there's a lot of resources out there for you to help you, and so you're not alone. And like I said, you know, if you're going to take the step to be an entrepreneur, know that it's hard work, but that it could be the most rewarding thing you ever do in your life.
Thank you, Oliver. Brittany, something else you want to add?
I definitely, I would say it's one of the most rewarding things for sure. And just reiterating that it's going to be hard work and it's going to be lonely. People don't realize that founders often are working by themselves for the first 6 months, a year or more sometimes. But there are certainly resources, but also it's important for folks to keep pushing on, because that's where the best ideas come from. So take advantage of everything around you, and also hold on to your equity. I think that's the one thing that we see is a lot of companies want private investment. So they go to venture capital firms or various groups and they give away equity really quickly. And if you have a really good concept and you have customers, you can grow organically. You don't need to take on an equity investment. So not be stingy, but definitely be protective of your company.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your experience of how to promote startups here in this Boston ecosystem of innovation. We have at the consulate an office of innovation headed by Paulina, who precisely works with many of the players in order to make bridges with the Mexican entrepreneurs and Mexican people interested in startups. So for those that are watching us, if you have questions, please knock on our doors and we will direct you to the different organizations, people that might be able to help you. So again, thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise in terms of this fantastic Boston ecosystem of innovation.
Gracias. Un placer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay healthy, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
We can still stay. Les iba a decir que se
the Facebook Live right now. Just one second.